Hello there, Grumsworth.
Oh, hello, Burlokk.
And hello to all of you lovely people out there. And welcome to the Preambull, your every so often digest of all things hobby. Now, Grumsworth, how the devil are you?
The devil is right, Burlokk. The devil is right. Not too bad, not too bad. This is going out a fairly late-ish hour, so
It is.
We're weak and withered from the week, so you're going to have to forgive our rambling. Might be more rambling than normal.
It's never a bad thing, brother. It's never a bad thing at all.
It's never a bad thing. But yeah, the week's been all right. Semi-productive, hobby-wise and stuff like that,
Good.
which I'm sure we'll go into. Everything else, pretty stable.
Yeah, the week's been good for me. I mean, in London here, it's been a mini heat wave. I don't know how things have been down your way, but it's been really hot. So, of course, it's been a bit of an uncomfortable nightmare. But nonetheless, things have been well, very well indeed.
Well, this is all good then, isn't it? So we're coming at our dear listeners from a place of good strength, aren't we?
Oh, yes.
I assume we've both been up to something good this hobby week. So I'll roll in first with this. So I've split. My focus has wandered a little bit, but I'm trying to cinch it back in. So what I've done is I've done a little bit more from my sort of running project, my Caldor gang for Necromunda there, the Knights of Doghead. 3 more of those guys are kind of at a half-finished stage. We've got some more of their browns on their robes, again using the GW contrast paints. That's all going along really nicely.
Very good, very good.
Got some of the rust on their weapons, that sort of bit. There's a couple of these guys have got the Forge World heads, as we discussed in our last podcast.
That's right.
And some of those require a little bit of a different treatment because they're not the kind of traditional masks that the rest of the gang wearing. One has a little executioner's hood on his head, so using a little bit of secret weapon miniatures, rubber and tire black to create a kind of a nice, not really true black, an interesting black for his hood against his brown robes. That's looking really solid. So I reckon about half of my hobby week has been spent on those guys. And the other half has been working towards finishing a big old Nurgle Blight King by the name of Golgoth the Butcher, who is from, he is a butcher as well. He is a monster.
Lovely looking figure. Should we get him up on the screen perhaps to have a little look at that one?
Yeah, let's have a little peek.
Let's do that.
I'm really happy with him at the moment. Started working up on him. I used a Death Guard green undercoat. It's actually like a washed out sort of green rather than a bright one, but it's still quite light. So it's a really nice base for anything Nurgly. As the name suggests, Death Guard green, you can't go wrong. Surely.
That's right. Yeah, it's quite desaturated, isn't it?
Which actually, it's allowed it to be a really nice base for the rest of his colours, which, as you can see, have actually come out quite rich. So it's a lot of paint using plenty of medium to keep it kind of opaque, and then working layer and layer and layer of it on to build up this now. Like his big old guts there, I think anyway, look super warm. Like if you were to give this dude a hug, you would die. But before that happens, it looks like it would be warm around there, doesn't it? His flesh is. And I actually wanted to stay away from like the really over-the-top green that Nurgle sometimes is painted with.
It can be a bit cartoony sometimes, I think.
It can be, which I do enjoy. But on this guy, on these 3, because I'm painting the whole of the Wormspat, which is the group that he's from, I wanted a really kind of earthy, semi-real look. Yeah. So his armour has the kind of almost the cartoony green, brown, orange glow, but then his flesh, it kind of looks fairly real for someone crawling with hideous diseases and bloated and evil. Hopefully next week I'll have pictures of him with a completed base and all of it.
That would be good. Yeah, that would be great to see. Yeah, that would be great to see.
Well, don't hold your hopes up though. because that might not happen. We'll see. We'll see. How about yourself, Burlokk? What have you been working on this week?
Well, for me, it's been a little bit more scenery, at least a little bit of scenery. Last episode, I was talking about how I was working on some like a ruined building with like a crashed spaceship situation going on. I've done a bit more to that now. I've got to the point where I've now fully textured it and undercoated it. During the undercoating process, you'll be familiar with this, Grumsworth. I ended up with a little bit of spray as nail. So we've got some undercoated scenery going on, which is now ready for painting, and it will be some rattle cans, a bit of airbrush work, some dry brushing with a big old brush. That'll be knocked out real quick. But I've enjoyed putting the last bit of construction onto that. That was a brief part of my week, but for a chunk of it, actually, I've been playing a bit of Heroes of the Storm again.
Have you now?
Yeah, it's very wise, as I would be saying.
Very wise.
I've been using a lot of Uther in Heroes of the Storm as a healer. So
now I will never not enjoy having Uther on my side, or playing him myself. I think he's fantastic.
He's the tank of choice, isn't he?
He is. He is the tank and healer combined. So for those of you sort of familiar with those terms, essentially our guy Uther here, not only can he keep everyone topped up and healthy, no one's going to die if you've got Uther swinging his hammer around, talking about light with his book. Right? But also he can do a spot of tanking as well. He can run interference, he can stun, he can get in the way. He's kind of hard to kill.
Yeah, so I've been enjoying a lot of Uther, actually. Well, it's been working out all right, actually. I accidentally logged into my US server. I disconnected from the EU server that I was playing on, and it somehow reconnected me to the US. And I didn't realize at first. I thought, why is my hero pool so small? Because of course the different servers don't share the same account progress. So yeah, I thought, oh well, I'm in the server now. I'll just have a game. I don't really care about progress so much, to be fair. Uther was available, so I thought I'd use some Uther. And I managed to claw my way up from like level 25 up to level 50. So out of my pool of heroes, I managed to claw up 25 levels. It's a bit of a mixture of heroes I use, to be fair. But for the most part, it was Uther. So I can now officially play on the US servers in my ranked matches, and I'm going to exclusively use an Uther main. So bit of fun.
If you guys are not familiar with this, Heroes of the Storm, there is a MOBA, and it's set in the Blizzard universes, isn't it?
Warcraft, Starcraft, Overwatch.
That's right.
Yeah, so lots of well-known and well-loved characters. For any of you Blizzard fans out there, you'll be familiar with what I'm talking about. If not, I would check it out. It's free to play. Heroes of the Storm is a free-to-play game, so I'd certainly have a go at playing it. But I mean, aside from that, no, but hobby week has been good for me. So yeah, some video games, a little bit of scenery building, and who knows what next week's going to bring. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Who knows, indeed. We'll see what it brings. We'll see what it brings. Maybe it'll be time just to break in something completely different. Maybe it's time to go fishing. I don't know.
Yeah. The only fishing I've done is in Warcraft, and that was about 6 months ago. But it felt relaxing, I guess.
That's the only sort of fishing I would have a conscience. I think, the real sort, not so much.
No, but let's move on to a topic of some substance, I suppose. I was thinking about what we could talk about this week, and the idea of source material came up when painting a miniature or drawing a piece of artwork. Source material that we draw from, mentally, physically. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good topic, actually. There's a few ways that we can discuss it, and there's a few ways that we probably all go about it. I think it's the case that subconsciously, I think we're always drawing in stuff for inspiration with our projects, whether it be our painting, building stuff, or painting our miniatures and stuff like that. So I think there is a certain sort of drip feed. If you're engaged in the sort of the universes that these hobbies are set in, if you're reading your books, even if you're looking at things like your map on the wall there, there's always kind of color palettes, schemes, certain kind of looks, ways of shading, lighting that you will just kind of naturally store away in your little old data banks there. And then that will come out in whatever you're working on. But I think we're kind of looking to talk about taking hold of specific pieces, maybe of art or photographs, or maybe even other already painted examples of the miniatures you're working on. We're going to talk about taking these and trying to apply their colours, their schemes, their styles of shading and lighting to our own models, which is something that we've both done a fair bit, haven't we?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. And there are some multitude of ways that I've drawn on for inspiration. I think in my very early days of painting miniatures specifically here, I do remember obviously looking through the pages of White Dwarf or your most recent army book or codex that you bought, and having a look at those gorgeously painted miniatures by the Heavy Metal team or the studio, and thinking that's what I want to do, that's what I want to recreate. And I do remember sitting there and trying to do it in almost a paint by numbers kind of way, emulate, copy, that sort of thing. It's how we work, isn't it? So
yes,
I found that I was looking at these images of these already painted miniatures and just trying to just copy what the Heavy Metal team did. In more recent years, as time's withered on and withered me with it, I found that my painting styles and abilities have changed over the years. Some may say they've got better, in fact. And I find that a big reason for that actually is the influences that I draw on. I'm not so much anymore looking at or wanting to achieve a replica of something that I've seen. Nowadays, I look at a miniature and I think, oh, how could I make that? What could I do with that? As opposed to saying, I want that exact thing. And I think for me, it's a big part of that shift was looking at real life and looking at how the real life affects those things in it, and some scenery, for example, that I've been working on. I want to make it look like a ruined building, so I'm going to go out and not look at the pages of White Dwarf or a codex book or a how to make scenery book. I'm going to go and look at pictures of an old ruined city from a war-torn area of the world and look at how ruined buildings look. Look at how the light will hit them. Certain color palettes work well with one another. If it's a 40K piece of scenery I'm working on, it might have craters, bullet holes, scorch marks, that kind of thing. Looking at those kind of real life images of what happens to a brick wall if you shoot it with a gun, what kind of impact crater does it leave, that kind of thing, and the coloration it leaves behind it. Looking at those real, and then just taking that picture and taking that color from that one picture, pulling it out and thinking, right, what color do I have in my paint set that looks like that? Putting that down, and building up my palette slowly in front of me, and then just using those to make the miniature come to life in that way. I've found to be the most valuable thing to help me progress my own painting along, and that's taking those real life images, that real life imagery. How about you?
I like that a lot. It's really interesting because I stray almost completely in the opposite direction as far as that's concerned. Like I do really enjoy taking inspiration for color, highlighting and shading from real objects, and I think it's really useful to very recently I painted some miniatures with an awful lot of weathering and rust on them, and I ended up sort of, as I was going about my day, I would spy kind of a rusty piece of rebar, a broken bollard, some other bit of stray metal corroding away on a train platform or something like this. And I get my phone out there, I think, that looks a cool colour. I like the way the weather has got at this, the way the metal is oxidised to produce those lovely kind of hues of rust. Yeah. So I take those pictures with my phone, and then I made a kind of a little collage out of them. And I thought, okay, so how do I apply this to a really small scale? And I actually found that was quite a struggle for me. And I think for me, it works really well on larger scale pieces. I can work from photographs or just from memory of something I've seen for real. but for me, I like to work from a picture, an image that has been rendered in 3D. So very recently, I used for the Cawdor game I'm doing, the Knights of Doghead there, their whole colour scheme is taken from a single still, which has been taken from the game Fallout 76 of my guy, Biff, who is head to toe in brown rags, barely a speck of skin showing.
Yeah.
And the particular shot, that particular scene, is out in a very, very grey sort of scale kind of background, and he looks very washed out in it.
Yeah.
And that's where I
Yeah.
took the inspiration. You've seen the picture, that's where I've taken the inspiration for that colour scheme from, using the way that the light hits him to fold another colour or another shade of brown in this case into the final colour palette that I chose to paint these guys in.
Yeah.
The same is true. I did the Eldari character from the Blackstone Fortress.
Of course. Yeah. 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 We got a picture of her, haven't we?
We have got a picture. We can throw her up.
Let's have a look at her.
Which I'm super pleased with. It was a model that I really was super uninterested in painting as well.
You know why, don't you?
Everything about it.
Robes. She's got robes.
Yeah. She has, and that was my first hurdle, the fact that she had robes. The second was that I don't like the pose of the model. There's loads of things actually I don't like about it, but it was the case that it was kind of a little bit of a challenge. I was given the model to paint, and I set myself a deadline with it. So I settled down and thought, how am I going to work this out? I don't really like painting robes. I'm not really very into the Elder or the Eldari. I'll call them Elder. How about that?
I don't know what this other thing you were talking about is, Grumsworth. I don't know what this Eldari is.
It's what all the kids are calling them.
Oh, well, that'd be why I don't know what's going on then.
Right. So I looked at the miniature and I thought, I need to paint it. I've got a short amount of time to do so. I don't want to take inspiration from the original, very beautifully painted version of it that's shown on the box art and stuff like this.
Yeah.
I didn't want to make a replica of that or something that was even like it. Harkening back to you talking about Heroes of the Storm there, the time that I was painting this model, I was playing an awful lot of it. There's an elf character in it, Tyrande, and one of her particular skins for that character had a really nice look about it to me. You know, good colours. I like the way that there was some interesting use of light on it. So again, it was working from a 2D piece that had been lit and coloured to appear 3D. And we can throw that image up again because I'm kind of, I'll find that for us, because I'm kind of happy that the end result that I painted actually looks very similar, I think.
Yeah, the colour palette you've chosen, it does match up quite neatly, doesn't it, actually? You can see, like, when you put the two next to each other, like, you know, you can see the influence quite quickly. Yeah, and it works really well, actually. So you found that this 3D image that has been produced in that non-realistic kind of way, you were able to draw the palette and the color composition from that and apply that to your miniature painting.
The Eldari that I painted there, she doesn't look particularly real by any stretch of the imagination. But there is some shading, there is some light, which suggests that she is a real character. She's obviously a 3D model, and that helps as well.
Yeah.
But I think it's still, I could quite happily stand her amid your very realistic, based on real terrain, and those things would match quite nicely.
Absolutely. Of course it would, yeah. But I think that's what you get from wargaming. Well, one of the many things you get from wargaming is that fusion, really, of realistic and fantasy. I mean, it's science fantasy, really, 40k, isn't it? If we're talking about the 40k universe, it's a science fantasy. You know, it's the last thing I painted to any, I think, good standards, where I drew on some direct inspiration from real life, is when I was doing a miniature from the Burrows and Badgers range of models. produced
nice
by
too.
Oathsworn Miniatures, I think, do them. But
Okay.
I painted the little toad animist. It's only a little thing, but I spent almost more time researching frogs and toads than I did painting this model, because once I was able to choose my palette of colors and things, it came together quite fast, because I decided how I was going to paint my miniature, what brushstrokes I would use, where I'd stipple what color in. And I'm surprised I don't do this more, because it seems to be a quicker way for me to paint in weird ways. But I
Yeah.
don't have the time really to do like lots of heavy research. I mean, I'm working on my Chaos Dwarfs, for example. I want these guys to look period, from like they're
Yeah,
pulled from the pages
absolutely.
of
Yeah.
White Dwarf, with a bit more of a modern twist on them. So I've got something already cooked up in my mind for that. That's why it takes me a long time to work on some of the other projects that I've got going on. Whereas this little toad guy, this toad animist that I painted, I've done him in an evening from start to finish. So yeah, his little bone staff that he's carrying. I looked up, what does bone actually look like when it's been sitting in the swamp for 20 years, and it's bizarre to think that it looks more grey than it does bleached bone, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It looks more
Yeah.
grey than it does like a brownie kind of colour. So using these sort of more natural palettes and natural colours allowed me to piece together my process much quicker than thinking of something fantastical or drawing on images that somebody else had already created, or otherworldly color schemes, because that just opens up too much of my own imagination to be able to play with it before I do it. So that slows me down in a way. Whereas if I'm saying, right, that toad has got a yellow strip down the front of his head, it's got like a darker underbelly, and its fingers are look like that, I can draw on it directly and say, right, that's the color I need to put there. And it goes back to that original day of, I'm going to paint by numbers here. Instead of choosing a miniature from the pages of White Dwarf, painted by Mike McVeigh, no doubt, it will be
No doubt.
from a wildlife photographer's camera.
So is what we're saying here, it tends to be the case that if you do put in a little bit of time researching, things seem to go speedier, don't they? Tend to be, I would say for myself, if I have worked from something, like I kind of really rate the imagination of miniature painters, whatever your skill level. I think there is a difference though between setting down and opening out a big crate of paints, getting your miniatures in front of you and thinking, I'm going to paint this and I don't really know how I'm going to start, but I'm just going to go at it. I'm going to let my imagination in the driving seat. We're just going to go wild with this. And that's really enjoyable. And you can yield some incredible results. But I think something that both of us have found, if you do a little bit of prep, research-wise, if you do have kind of a rough plan, if you're working with even just a minimal colour scheme from an image, I think the results come through quicker. And actually, from my point of view, I think probably I end up being more happy with the results rather than the kind of the struggle with imagination where you end up painting the guy's face and you're really happy with it, and then you look at the rest of them and you think, what do I do to these bloody robes?
Yeah, what next?
What next? What next? Whereas if you have kind of an image that you're working from, whether it be a landscape, a painting of some buildings, a photograph of some buildings, a photograph of some military types wandering around a field, whatever, or your images from a video game.
Yeah,
I think if you have something that you can, it helps fill in the blanks that imagination sometimes takes a little while to do.
you can almost create more blanks with your imagination, can't you? You can
massively.
you can go running in circles far too many times. And I like what you just said, really, because I've been in the same situation on numerous occasions, and I wonder if I'll ever learn. But I will do that. I will start on a miniature, open up a box full of paints, and there's every color you can think of. It's, where do you begin? Okay, so you do his face. You don't. Okay, great. I'm really happy with how it turned out, but I've got no plan. What do I do next? But looking at other inspiration areas that you can draw from. I mean, one of my favorite things to help color my imagination, if I am thinking of something fresh on my own, is the artwork. I often find myself thinking about the art of Mark Gibbons from the old days, especially from something like the Chaos Codex from second edition, for example. He done well. Maybe we do have time for some more Fabius Bile talk, because there was a lovely image of Fabius Bile.
Go on, Fabulous B.
There was a lovely image of old Fabulous B in the second edition 40k Chaos Codex, full page, Mark Gibbons through and through, lovely black and white, pencil and ink. It looked incredible. And seeing some of those, some of that artwork might not necessarily have influenced a particular paint job, but it would certainly have influenced some of my creative decisions going forward for whatever the project might be. So I do have some absolute favorites, like the Fabius Bile picture, for example. I think you've got a favorite Mark Gibbons artwork, haven't you? One of these Eldari you were talking about.
We'll call it by its true name, as it was at the time as well. Yeah, it's an Elder Striking Scorpion aspect warrior from the Codex Elder of the time, and it is just a stunning picture.
Yeah,
the way Mark has like the use of light in everything that he does is incredible. Really is. Again, it's all black and white there, but your mind kind of, striking scorpions tend to be green, right? And just looking at this black and white picture, it's like I can visualize the color all throughout this guy.
I can paint this guy with my mind.
I can paint this guy using mind bullets.
That's right.
Which is probably what I did at the time. I can't ever remember painting a striking scorpion though.
Well, I remember painting a striking scorpion Exarch in odd tones, because I don't know if you remember, but in the in some of the showcase pages inside White Dwarf, or even in the Codex books, you did tend to find that there'd be a single page usually of just variant color schemes. And I did there was a yellow and a green striking scorpion. And I remember doing like a split design, how you have those quartered Space Marines. I did something similar to that with a bright yellow and a bright green. It looks absolutely awful thinking back now, but I really enjoyed doing it. But I drew that inspiration, that idea of painting by numbers, going from the book, until then I sat down in a Games Workshop and said, could you show me how to do this technique? Because I'm really struggling. And a lovely man. I do remember his name as well, Darren Dorado. If you're listening, Darren, it's been a while.
Thumbs up, Mr. Dorado.
Exactly. He was a great guy. He showed me lots of very interesting techniques, and speaking to a lot of my, I should call them peers, really, all the other lads and lassies hanging around Games Workshops and being miscreants in the old days, saying, how did you do that on your miniature? What did you look at to get that effect? That was it. That was part of the learning process, and that was also an inspiration for how you can learn and develop those skills, I think. What's your experience with feeding off of other people in the community?
I mean, I've long been a feeder off of other people. I mean, it's just in my nature. I can't, I really can't help it. You're also tasty. But from the sort of absorbing hobby type stuff, I remember a guy, again, in Games Workshop back in the day, when they were jammed full of staff. And so there'd always be a couple that were not really interested in selling anything to you. They were interested in sitting at their tables and asking you if you'd like a painting lesson. A lad called Jim, good old Jim. Jim was the fellow who taught me how to dry brush. I learned a lot from it, and it was just probably sat down for a single hour. A lot of kind of technique and things like this.
How to hold the brush, the way to apply the paint.
The brush.
Something as simple as that.
Yeah, all really useful stuff. It strays away a little bit from our topic of using images and stuff for inspiration. But I think you can gather inspiration from those hobby gurus' words, from their advice there. When I was sitting down and Jim was showing me how to paint chainmail by just simply painting it black, taking a nice looking metallic colour, wiping the majority of it off the brush, and then gently flicking it across it, dry brushing, the mind was completely shattered.
This has changed my world.
It did, because it meant suddenly, like a load of dwarfs who sat there for a long time in unpainted chainmail were suddenly resplendent in a good solid metal armor, which probably took me an afternoon to do. Mithril, precisely. So I think that you can draw inspiration um, in that way from the support of your hobby gurus and stuff like that, which you certainly have done. And there have been many good painters that I've come across. And I was recently chatting to someone who was able to fully paint every Warhammer Underworlds warband almost within a couple of days of them coming out, which is wonderful because obviously we all like to be playing with fully painted miniatures, and his miniatures are superb. They're really, really nicely done. But what he does is, the biggest strength he has is able to get them done so quickly and to
Speed.
a nice standard.
Yeah.
Speed, yeah. Quantity is a form of quality, and that was something that I've tried to take on from him. So I think you're still learning, even after many years in the hobby. And I think people's their kind of their sort of work ethic around painting their models can be a really strong inspiration.
It can do. Yeah, absolutely right. It can. And even if you were to look for just a few minutes, an Instagram hashtag for miniature painting, you'll find hundreds, if not thousands, of painters out there that are more than happy to offer you pearls of wisdom, words of advice, just to help you on your journey. And that sort of community spirit still is built into the hobby, I think. You have many,
very much so, yeah.
Yeah, you have many very accomplished painters out there that have Patreon set up. Some are free, some are paid, but either way, you can access them, and you can draw on more inspiration. You can try to emulate those artists that you really feel a kinship with, or that you really like their work, and that all helps the health of the hobby. I think the more people doing that, the more people getting engaged and involved, the better.
It's more of that hobby salve, isn't it?
It is. Smear it on good and thick.
Get it on factor 50. Cover yourself in hobby salve.
That's right.
Everything will be fine. Your miniatures will look beautiful, and you'll win more games as well. So, and that is a proven fact.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I remember actually having a talking of like painting guides and things. I do remember there being an heavy metal painting guide years ago, a book, how to paint like the heavy metal team do.
So you're saying that, but you must have a copy of that somewhere.
I think I do. I'm looking at a bookshelf now. I'm pretty sure it's over there somewhere. I think so. Yeah. I'll get a picture of it up on the screen. Perhaps maybe I can find it between it now and this going out. There we go.
Yeah. And there it is.
There it is. Like that.
You found it. But they're nice. They're nice things to have, and they're cool things to work from. And it actually leads me into a question I was going to ask. It's something that I've had happen on a couple of occasions, but not really very often. Have you been able to draw a colour scheme for a miniature squad or army even from the written word? Have you ever read a book and thought, okay, it doesn't necessarily have to be a description of colour or anything like that, but a sort of a theme, a kind of feeling, a vibe from reading a book, and then you think, hang on, I need to paint those all very, very green.
Yeah, I've got a very specific example as well that I can use that some of our listeners and viewers may even be able to remember or recognize from what I say.
Rock and roll.
There was a series of books by the fabulous writer Dan Abnett. You're familiar with some of his work, I know. He's done some very good pieces, and there's one series of books called the Gaunt's Ghost novels. I don't know if you've read the Gaunt's Ghost novels. They were some of the first works of his that I read, and for those uninitiated, should I say, it's about a regiment of Imperial Guard, and the books are probably 20 plus years old, so no spoilers here. But the Tanith First and Only, they're like a Scottish Celtic kind of style with bagpipes and tartan and all that sort of thing. Anyway, It's not those guys I'm talking about. In one of these books, there was a regiment they fought with called the Vitrian Dragoons.
Brilliant.
And they were described as, the only thing that they were described as color-wise, if memory serves, there was an element of burgundy or red to their attire.
Lovely.
But what they had was this odd mail or scale mail that they were wearing, typical guardsman flak armor, no doubt. But they could like adjust it with a button or something, and it would flip, and it would become like mirrored to deflect las weapons or whatever it might be. So they were known. This regiment were known for this particular type of armor they would wear, and not much detail was given about their homeworld, their planet. But here in these few short chapters on the Vitrian Dragoons and how they fought alongside the Tanith First and Only, the Gaunt's Ghosts, really inspired me to paint. It was just one single squad because I'd taken some pieces of well, it was basically a kit bash. So I'd taken some other plastic figures, mixed them up with some Imperial Guard bits, and I managed to fashion together this set of miniatures that looked like they were described in this book. And I just painted them in this lovingly grimdark and grimdark color scheme. And it in my mind it was perfect because there wasn't a huge amount of description, as you said. How about you? Have you had something similar?
I was trying to think of a good example, and I have had a few actually. The one that springs to mind is, I think the only issue with bringing this up is I think I might have brought these books up on every version of this podcast.
That's okay. Episode. Continuity is good.
Continuity. Okay, then. Right. So, Ricardo Pinto, the Stone Dancer, the Chameleon. One of the things that is really, really important that runs through the story is a connection between three colours. So this is a lot less sort of abstract compared to your description. These colours are very, very important to the characters throughout. They're used to denote rank, your kind of status within society. They are also the colours which kind of construct their religion. And reading the first one many, many, many years ago, as I did now, it made me mildly obsessed, maybe a little bit more than mild even, with the colour green. Okay. Genuinely. The books are replete with references to jade in all its forms, from the very, very black, almost kind of oily green, smoky jade, to that absolutely pure, like a green sea pool type jade. And this man banging on about jade through all of his books and really bringing the colour to life, it left a lasting impression on me. To this day? To this very day, genuinely to this very day. And given a chance, I will I will work with blue greens, that kind of turquoisey end, any other green, and something that is either orange or red, really. Yeah. If I can get those colours into a colour scheme, and not just on a small scale, like I will look at things. I was recently looking at some new Necron models, and I was thinking, I wonder if I could get away with painting them a sort of smoky, oily green. Jade green. I thought to myself,
you could definitely get away with that.
Yeah,
definitely could.
But then I thought maybe with some sort of black obsidian sort of accents, maybe just a splash of red.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, I know where that colour scheme comes from. It comes from those really impacty books that I read.
And then you look back along the shelf at all the armies you painted over the years, and they're all a different shade of jade.
So you say that, but genuinely, so I've got a few up on the shelves there. A few of the Warhammer Underworld's war bands, and it's the case that the ghosts I did green. That's kind of quite trad at the moment. There's a lot of people painting their various spirits and spectres and stuff. Especially, I think the GW ones, the Night Haunt, tend to be quite green at the moment. But I also did my sepulchral guards, the skeletons. I thought, how do I, subconsciously it was working away. How do I move towards a blue-green palette?
Yeah,
And
I did mine pink and blue.
What's better than pink and blue? Green and blue.
Green and blue.
I do. I tend to lean towards like black, red, and green. Obviously, not exclusively, but they're the first colours that drop into my mind when there isn't an image to work from that's informing my colour scheme. It's when imagination takes over. There is no argument with it at all. That is where that's rooted. So that for me is a good example where words in a book, although they are describing a colour, it's not like you're getting a feeling of the colour or the more abstract that you've described there, but it's the fact that the colour is described with such detail and such kind of wonder.
Such weight as well, by the sounds of things. If this is such an important element in this whole arc of story, it obviously has some sort of bearing on everything around it. That can influence the way you read the book, as well as how you would then take that idea on to influence your creative decisions. But talking about panoplies of colour, talking of other old things, we're going to move on to our next segment. This segment, for those of you who are familiar with our podcast here on the Preamble, know that we like to delve into the artwork, the rules and text of a magic card. Isn't that right, Grumsworth?
We love it. We're trying to work through all of them. It's a noble goal. We're on card number 4 at this point, aren't we?
Card number 4.
We're going strong. Once this one's out, 4 under our belt. Not a bad start.
So
what have we got today then? What have we got, and who has it been picked by?
Of course, yes, because we get one of our viewers or listeners to choose the artwork or the card that we're going to be looking at, and this week's was chosen by Elliot at 311 Props. Thank you, Elliot.
Thank you, Elliot.
It's called Horrible Hordes by Ian Miller.
Horrible Hordes. This really is a treat, actually. Yeah, it's really cool.
This is quite an incredible piece. It's from the one of the older sets. It's from Mirage. I mean, it looks old anyway because it's got that brown border to it. It's got that old style. It looks. I don't even know. The artwork itself looks really interesting. It's just colour, isn't it? It's just an explosion of colour.
It is. It is a riot of colour. But we'll get into a bit of a dig on that as well, because I think there's a lot to unpack there, isn't there?
Yeah, you start us off with this one then, Grumsworth. Go on.
Okay then. I'm very happy to be starting off, especially with this one. The Horrible Hordes here, I really like the way that this often happens in Magic cards, but I think this is a really prime example. The artwork here, it completely informs the entire rest of the card, or the other way round might have occurred. So what we've got here is an artifact creature. So it's a mechanical construct imbued with life in some fashion. So what we've got here are a rampaging array of sentient, like, bits of furniture, constructed things. We've got a lamppost in there. All manner of strange kind of small, metallic-looking kind of creatures, which look fairly savage at this point, don't they? There's some big sort of snarling old faces on there.
So there's so much going on, and the idea that this is obviously a horde, and they all look pretty happy with themselves in their own little way. They look quite gleeful, don't they?
They're pretty jolly, yeah.
And I mean, I'm leaning in close. There's so much going on. I'm trying to look at it all and get it all in, but given that they're horrible and they're a horde, the name speaks for itself, really, with the artwork, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's doing really well to promote that idea, isn't it? There's lots of them.
This is totally bizarre, though. I mean, really bizarre. It reminds me a little bit of the Labyrinth when Sarah and her compatriots run into Goblin Town. and
Okay,
or
yeah,
the
yeah,
Goblin
yeah.
City, should I say? And all these odd armored and armed goblins come rushing out of their little homes, all squat and tiny and really angry. It reminds me of them.
Yeah, I mean that's really good though, isn't it? That I completely agree. It is a mass of smaller, vicious little savages, isn't it? Hence the name, the horrible hordes. There, that fits really perfectly.
It
Um,
does.
I really like the style here is very evocative of those older magic sets where there didn't really seem to be a very cohesive art direction or style. They almost the pieces of art were one-offs for that specific card, weren't they? The
Yeah,
style itself, I really think is really interesting. Um, it has kind of a very unrealistic, not really going to say cartoony because that sounds like it's doing it down, but it's an unrealistic portrayal, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. It's almost as if, I mean, I can't remember a huge amount about the lore of the Mirage block, but it almost looks like it's a dreamscape of a character
Very,
within the. So it looks so at odds, should I say, with the rest of the set. There are some images, as you say, a mishmash of art direction that went on for this, I
yeah,
think, and such a varied amount of styles that were thrown into the pot when it came to these older sets of Magic cards. It did stand out from the others, and I think that what Ian Miller's done here, it's like he's portrayed this idea that it's just this onrushing tide of whatever of artifact creatures, and I believe it was errata to be a spirit actually as well. So they're artifact creatures. They're also spiritual. So obviously these things might well be possessed or taken over somehow by some sort of spirit or demon. Yeah, it's absolutely chaos, isn't it?
yeah. I really like it for that. I get the way that was errata for that as well
Mm.
because they do the looks on their faces and the way they're sort of capering forward and rushing forward. It looks like they are like imbued with sentience, doesn't it?
Certainly
You can
does.
imagine
Yeah.
that as a swarm of spirits that have been directed into the metal flesh of all these bits and bobs. I like what you say, connecting it to the set that it's from, Mirage. There, it does look kind of like a dreamlike horde, doesn't it? It looks very psychedelic. It's very kind of trippy. It has that kind of the proportions are very very ill. There's a lot of kind of motion with it. The colours are super bright in places, um, and all on that sort of pale green kind of ground. It's quite a jarring kind of look, isn't it?
Yeah, there's no one point that my eyes are drawn to initially. Either the face of that big round yellow jug in the middle,
Yeah,
or the face of that big square
chest behind it,
chest
sort of thing.
behind it. That
Yeah,
was sort of where my eyes fell, but it wasn't
yeah.
easy to find that, which I it may well have been intentional by
That's
by
part
old
of
Ian
it.
Miller there. Yeah, I like to
Yeah,
think
I
it was.
really agree. Yeah, yeah, it makes for that horde kind of thing, doesn't it?
Mm.
Your eyes aren't really drawn to individual pieces. It is the host as a whole.
Yeah, it's only once you take a real closer look, then you start to see
Mm.
all those little individuals that have got little characters of their own.
Yeah,
Really interesting piece art wise.
it
But
is. It
when it
is.
comes mechanically, it works quite nicely as well.
Mm.
They have an ability here called Rampage, and there were varying levels of Rampage. This one is Rampage 1, but there was also 2, 3. And the rules are that when this creature attacks, it's a 2/2 spirit artifact creature. And whenever it attacks and it has a creature blocking it, it becomes more powerful the more creatures block it. So it says here, as you can see, for each creature assigned to block it beyond the first, this creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So the more individuals you throw at this horrible horde to stop it damaging you, the more powerful this thing gets, which kind of alludes a little bit to this idea that these things are a dream or some sort of illusion, that the more people that get in front of it or try and get in the way, they feed off of
The bigger it
their
gets.
consciousness, and the
Yeah.
bigger this thing grows. and the flavor text with it, few are able to underestimate the hordes. Says quite a lot, doesn't it, really?
It's what I've always thought. Few are able to underestimate the hordes. I really like that. That's why I think that the art works really, really well with everything else about this card. It kind of comes across as a complete package. The quote is lovely, and it works really well with what we're seeing.
Yeah.
You know, it might walk in as a humble 2/2 on its way in, but if you start to put some weight in front of it and try and keep it at bay, the madness just grows. It just keeps marching.
Sadly, we are faced with another problem now, Grumsworth.
I've never been faced with a problem more pressing as the one you're about to mention. What is it? Father Time?
Old Father Time. He is knocking on our door right now.
Bloody knew it.
Sadly, we're going to have to get ready to say our goodbyes.
That is very sad. That is very sad. But we'll pour Father Time a cup of tea or something. See if we can get him to sod off for another week or something. Keep him at bay, you know.
Oh, and it'll be about another week until we're ready to do another one of these. That's for sure.
Yeah, but he's going to be knocking again then, isn't he? That's the problem with this guy.
I can't chase him off for too long.
It's been a pleasure, isn't it, Burlokk? It is for me, anyway.
Yeah. During these uncertain times where socializing isn't allowed.
It's not allowed in the traditional sense, but we're making it work, aren't we?
That's right.
As plenty of others are. So, you know, it was of its time. Go on. Hit us with some solid gold book quotery.
Book quotery?
Yeah.
It's from a series of books. Well, it's not from a whole series. It's from the beginning of a long series of books.
Is it now?
Yeah. I think you may know where I'm going to go with this already.
I mean, there's one particularly long-running series of books, and if it's what I'm thinking about, after those goodbyes have been said, I reckon you roll the quote and we close this out. What do you think? Is it that worthy a quote?
I think it probably is.
Nice.
So
I trust you. From
myself.
Yeah, and me as well, folks. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, either next week or whenever the next time may be. If you want to get in touch with us, please, our details are below and above, and at the end of this video as well. And until next time, be good to one another. Stay safe.
Stay safe. Yeah. Look after each other. Enjoy your hobby projects and whatnot. And you know, if you can pass on a little hobby nugget of goodness, something useful, teach some kid to drybrush or something like that, I reckon all will be well in the world. Go on.
Just remember, brother, I was there the day that Horus slew the emperor.
Brilliant. And we'll cut it there.
Oh, yeah, we'll cut it. You've been listening to The Preamble. Be sure to check us out on Twitch, Spotify, or find us on Player FM. And if you want to get in touch with us, send an email to thepreamble@gmail.com. Your hosts were Grumsworth and Burlokk, brought to you by roguesgaming.com. Special thanks to our contributors, our showcase artist, and of course, to all of you. See you next time.